We're building the future of the electric vehicle.
I'm signing an executive order setting out a target of 50% of all passenger vehicles sold by 2030.
It's gotten so bad that nearly 4,000 car dealers sent a letter to Biden saying his demands regarding EV production are unrealistic.
In a jaw-dropping turn of events, car dealers are at war with the Biden administration over their aggressive push for electric vehicles. Tensions are at an all-time high as dealers refuse to get on board with Biden's electrification plans. You're probably wondering what's behind this revolt. Why are dealers so fed up with EVs? And what does this mean for the future of electric cars in America? Well, buckle up and get ready to be shocked as we uncover the truth behind this EV civil war. Biden's controversial EV mandate. Let's rewind for a moment. Back in 2021,
Learned this morning that President Biden is going to sign an executive order setting a goal of having 50% of new vehicles sold in the U.S. to be zero emission by 2030.
President Biden signed an executive order with the goal of making 50% of new car sales electric by 2030. This mandate calls for rapid acceleration in EV adoption over the next few years. By 2025, the target is to reach 40 to 50% of new car sales being electric. To put this in perspective, in 2021, EVs made up less than 5% of new car sales in the US. So Biden's plan represents a huge leap in a very short time frame. Many experts have criticised this target as overly ambitious and unrealistic, and now car dealers are adding their voice to the opposition. A recent survey found that 83% of dealers believe the Biden administration is pushing too hard and too fast on EVs. Dealers warn that the regulatory pace is getting way ahead of customer demand, and they should know dealers interact directly with car buyers every day. This growing rift has many dealers refusing to embrace EVs. Some are even boycotting EVs altogether.
I'm signing an executive order setting out a target of 50% of all passenger vehicles sold by 2030 will be electric.
Biden's executive order calls for a rapid transition to electric vehicles in an extremely short period of time. Within less than a decade, the goal is to completely transform the auto industry and achieve mass adoption of EVs. This top-down, heavy-handed approach has been criticised by many experts as unrealistic. Trying to force such an abrupt change in how consumers purchase vehicles is likely to face massive resistance. The auto industry is complicated, with long design and manufacturing lead times. Flipping a switch overnight to all-electric is next to impossible. Supply chains, production facilities, workforce skills, everything needs to be methodically transitioned. Yet the Biden administration seems to be discounting these complexities. Their attitude seems to be, go all electric by 2030 or else. But the auto industry doesn't work that way. The EV transition needs to be carefully planned and phased in over time. Auto companies have warned that an overly rushed approach risks severe disruption in production, sales, and jobs. Dealers are especially concerned that the rapid mandates don't reflect consumer demand. Surveys show most car buyers still have reservations about EVs. Trying to force-feed EVs when customers aren't ready will lead to rejection. A more prudent, phased approach is needed. Set ambitious, long-term targets, but have interim steps to ensure stability. Work closely with industry stakeholders to align policy goals with practical feasibility. Instead, the Biden plan comes across as an idealistic top-down diktat. It risks provoking an industry backlash that stalls the EV transition entirely. Reasons dealers hate Biden's EV push.
It's a terrible process to get these minerals out of the ground.
Yep.
It is not ecologically friendly. The big lie about batteries. I mean, look, it's a complicated question, but people should be able to buy what they want. They want to buy EV.
1. Aggressive targets. First and foremost, dealers think Biden's timeline is ridiculously rushed. Requiring 50% of new sales to be electric in just 7 years is seen as unreasonable and detached from reality. Current EVs represent about 5% of the market. To increase that tenfold in less than a decade is a monumental challenge. dealers argue that consumer adoption takes time. Forcing the transition too quickly risks a massive market disruption. Many point to the chaotic phase-out of internal combustion engines in California as an example of poor policy planning. 2. Lack of consumer demand. This brings us to the next issue: lack of consumer demand. Dealers interact with car buyers every day, and what they see is that most consumers still prefer gas-powered vehicles. A recent study found only 9% of car shoppers are likely to purchase an EV in 2022. Cost, range anxiety, and charging access remain top concerns. Forcing EVs when buyers aren't ready will lead to unsold inventory sitting on dealer lots and angry customers who can't find what they want. Dealers insist that the transition to EVs should be consumer-led, not imposed by decree. Market forces should dictate the pace. 3. Insufficient charging infrastructure. Another huge roadblock is lack of charging infrastructure. For EVs to succeed, easy access to public charging is essential, but coverage remains very spotty across much of America. Rural areas in particular suffer from a severe shortage of charging stations. But even urban centres lack adequate capacity to support a flood of new EVs. Until charging infrastructure is vastly built out, most car buyers will be hesitant to switch to electric. Dealers are frustrated that the charging build-out isn't keeping pace with EV sales mandates. This mismatch sets up EVs to fail. 4. Higher costs and complexity. EVs also bring higher costs and complexity for dealerships. First, they require big upfront investments in charging equipment, technician training, and facility upgrades. These costs can run $100,000 to $500,000 per store, and with lower profit margins on EVs, the payback is unclear. EVs are also more complex to sell and service. Sales training is extensive to explain the new technology, and repairs often require specialised diagnostic equipment and expertise. Many dealers feel overwhelmed by the investments and training required to sell electric cars profitably and effectively. 5. Lack of EV product availability. Finally, lack of EV model availability remains an obstacle. Due to parts shortages and production bottlenecks, many automakers are still struggling to ramp up EV volumes. Long wait lists for popular models like the Ford F-150 Lightning extend well into 2023. Limited selections turn buyers away. Dealers are frustrated by lack of inventory. They can't sell what automakers can't produce in adequate numbers. Dealer rebellion against EVs.
Are in combustion, would you suggest taking the step as the bridge, so to speak, to a PHEV, a plug-in hybrid, or do you think perhaps going right over that to an electric vehicle?
With all these grievances piling up, it's no wonder dealers are rebelling against Biden's EV push. A recent survey found that 40% of dealers refuse to invest what's needed to sell electric cars. This dealer mutiny is already impacting brands like GM and Ford. Half of Buick dealers have opted out of selling the new EV models. At Ford, over 1,300 dealers declined to become EV certified. They will be restricted to selling gas-powered vehicles only. Other brands like Toyota and Mazda face similar dealer revolts as stores balk at the costs of going electric. This lack of enthusiasm by dealers will severely hamper the adoption of EVs. With nowhere to purchase or service electric cars locally, most buyers will be deterred. The anger and resistance from dealers towards EVs is reaching a boiling point. Many feel their concerns are not being heard by automakers and regulators. Forced to shoulder the burden of EV sales mandates, dealers are fighting back. They warn of eroding profits, stranded inventory, and dissatisfied customers if EVs are pushed too aggressively. Having invested heavily in their franchises, dealers are wary of being left with stranded assets if public charging remains inadequate or EV quality issues emerge. They don't want to become wedded to a technology consumers end up rejecting. Surveys show dealers are overwhelmingly opposed to the pace of the EV transition pursued by Biden. 83% believe it is too rushed and detached from ground realities.
The majority of Americans say that federal incentives are not convincing them to purchase EVs.
We're not ready for this transition.
All of a sudden going to be able to afford a $60,000, $70,000, in some cases $80,000 EV. It's just not practical.
Dealers also dismiss proposals to eventually phase out gasoline vehicles as fantasy. Attempting to ban gas cars, as California aims to do by 2035, will only incite massive public frustration, dealers argue. Instead of top-down dictates, dealers demand a consumer-driven transition that respects market dynamics. EVs should succeed or fail based on their merits with buyers, not government decree. For now, many dealers plan to resist the EV push through boycotts. Half of Buick and Cadillac dealers have refused to sell the brand's new electric models, citing profitability concerns. These defections by major retailers spell trouble for GM and other automakers, banking on rapid EV adoption. Lack of enthusiastic retail partners imperils the entire EV enterprise. Can this rift be repaired? So that's the inside scoop on the civil war raging between the Biden administration and car dealers over EVs. The question is, can the relationship be salvaged, or will dealers succeed in derailing Biden's electrification vision? For EVs to succeed, alignment between policymakers and auto retailers is crucial. Dealers play an indispensable role in transitioning car buyers to electric. Here are some steps that could help repair the rift. Work with dealers to develop realistic, phased-in targets for EV adoption that balance ambition and practicality. Forcing change too swiftly risks collapse. Focus aggressively on charging infrastructure expansion to alleviate range anxiety. Make installation more affordable and efficient for dealers. Offer dealers robust incentives and support to offset the cost of upgrading for EV sales. Don't mandate change without funding the transition. Grow EV model offerings at a pace aligned with demand. Prevent inventory shortages that discourage buyers. Streamline EV manufacturing so simpler, more cost-effective electric platforms can enable mass adoption. Mending the divide between the Biden administration and auto dealers won't be easy. Positions on both sides have hardened over months of rising tensions. Some pragmatic steps could help rebuild trust and cooperation. Restructure the EV transition timeline to be more incremental and achievable. Have interim targets and off-ramps instead of a rigid long-term mandate. Increase incentives to $5,000 plus per EV sold to motivate dealers. Tie incentives to sales volumes so more EVs moved earn bigger rewards. Launch awareness campaigns to stimulate consumer interest in EVs. Offer test drives and hands-on experiences to convert more buyers. Work with utilities to accelerate charging infrastructure build-out. Offer dealers rebates on charging installation costs. Guarantee EV profitability for dealers by subsidizing sales during the transition period. Cover any losses from discounted EVs. Share data analytics with dealers on regional EV demand patterns and charging infrastructure needs. Allow customization. Provide dealers with comprehensive EV training programs and digital tools to reduce sales and service learning curves. Phase in EV mandates gradually by region based on infrastructure readiness and consumer adoption data. With a more collaborative, dealer-centric approach, the Biden administration can rebuild trust. But the window is closing fast. Bold action is needed to change course before the EV revolution stalls. So stay tuned for more electrifying news as this high-stakes story continues to evolve. The road to an all-electric future promises to be a wild ride.